When I was 5 years old, I was obsessed with rocks. Every day at recess, I would go out to the playground and adopt at least one new rock into my collection. And every day, my backpack grew heavier and heavier. One day, after I came home from school, my mom tried to lift my bag with one hand and immediately dropped it with a thud. That's when she gave me this absolutely incredulous look. I feel like she was really hoping there wasn't a dead body in there. At the very least, the thought probably crossed her mind. Anyway, she unzipped the front pocket, and my entire rock hoard spilled out. I think that was the moment my mom realized she had a scientist on her hands. 16 years later, here we are. I'm a neuroscience major at Duke. I no longer fill my backpack with rocks, but as a scientist, they're still interesting to me. There's one type of rock that's particularly fascinating, the geode. Sometimes, when rocks are being formed at high temperatures or under immense pressures, something unexpected happens. The rock takes in minerals from its surroundings, and slowly but surely, they grow into crystals. Now, you'd never be able to identify a geode just by looking at it because, from the outside, it just looks like an ordinary rock. But when you crack a geode open, that's when you're able to see the crystals within. I found that human beings are kind of the same. Sometimes, while we're going through life and trying to figure ourselves out, something unexpected disrupts our formation process. And then after that, we're never the same. From the outside, we appear unremarkable. It's only when you come closer and get to know us that you're able to see the crystals inside. I learned that 2 summers ago when I traveled to Cusco, Peru with the Duke Engage program. There, I was assigned to work at El Hogar Juana de Asa, a home for sexual assault survivors. It was one of only 2 places in the area, so the girls who lived there came from all over the country. Some from the Peruvian rainforest, some from the urban jungle of Lima, and some from small rural villages hidden in the hills. They ranged from 13 to 18 years old, but they all shared one reality. Someone else made a choice, and their lives changed forever. At first, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to speak, how to act, or how to cope with the horrifyingly real situation in front of me. So I took a step back. Before I spoke or acted, I observed and listened. One girl, Yenny, watched her life take a sickening turn at the age of 13. That was the year her family went bankrupt and her parents, to fuel their need for alcohol, sold her to a man just down the street. For nearly a year, she remained a prisoner in his house, subjected to all kinds of unimaginable horrors. And within a few months, she fell pregnant with a child while still a child herself. But one day, Yenny saw an opportunity to escape. While her captor was out of the house, she snuck a phone call to a neighbor who called the police, explained what was happening, and ultimately freed her. But even after being rescued, Yenny couldn't go back to her old life. Too much had changed. The local court put her in the care of a group of compassionate Catholic nuns who had just opened a home for girls like her, El Hogar Juana de Asa. There, Yenny had her baby and began trying to move forward with her life. See, she wasn't a victim. She was a survivor. She told me that she wanted to be a lawyer when she grew up, so that she could advocate on behalf of those who couldn't speak for themselves. She'd created a rock-hard shell to protect herself, but within that, there were crystals. I could tell you 10 other stories just like Yenny's. I could tell you how Maria's mother disowned her after she was violated. I could tell you how 11-year-old Carla picked out her baby's name from a movie that she saw. But I'm not here to tell you these stories today. That's not because they're not important. On the contrary, it's incredibly important to listen to survivors and to believe them. But in light of the circumstances, given that these horrible events have already disrupted these girls' lives, the question I want to focus on today is what next? How do we empower survivors to move forward, to transcend their past traumas and pave brighter futures? There are 2 steps. The first is to give them agency, to make them feel capable of creating change in their own lives. Back at the Hogar, we had one rule. We never referred to the girls as victims. We always called them survivors. Words hold power. If you call someone a victim, you're telling them that what surrounds them and what happens to them defines who they are. They're a statistic, a sad story, a mere product of their experiences. But if you call someone a survivor, you're empowering them. You're telling them that they have the power to shape their experiences and not just the other way around. Something terrible happened to them, but they control how they respond. They can start to heal themselves and forge their way forward. And this linguistic empowerment isn't just a matter of labels. We can empower other people by the way that we talk to them. Listen to them. Show interest. Take their concerns seriously. Sympathize, empathize, and above all, believe them. The second step is to give survivors the opportunities to improve their own quality of life. And for that, you need to study the situation and tailor your solution according to each person's needs. The directors at the Hogar told me that they were having trouble financing the girls' education, basic necessities, and medical expenses. Because the young mothers were minors, they didn't qualify for government-provided health care, nor did they have any family to help them. So in response, I negotiated with 3 local private clinics for discounts and exoneration on medical expenses. And to fund their basic necessities and their education, I created 2 websites, one in English, one in Spanish, with an online fundraising system to expedite and globalize the donation process. Using those donations, the girls have since launched their own small business, which they operate out of their home. They make and sell handmade bracelets and potato donuts for a chance at a better life. After I came back to the United States, I started researching sexual assault from a neuroscientific perspective. I reached out to researchers and clinicians who were exploring ways to help sexual assault survivors transcend their past traumas. The process of moving forward is generally not quick, and it's certainly not easy. Sexual assault and other traumatic events leave deep social, psychological, and emotional scars. Sexual assault predisposes survivors to an increased risk of mood disorders, substance abuse, and difficulty maintaining familial relationships, to name a few. That's because the experience of being sexually assaulted fundamentally shakes survivors' faith in their present and future relationships, especially if the assaulter was someone they were close to. So how do we help survivors heal psychologically and reintegrate into society? Dr. Susan Roth, a neuroscientist and Duke professor emerita, treated sexual assault survivors at the Duke Psychology Clinic and researched coping mechanisms for nearly 4 decades. She told me that for treatment to be successful, the therapist first has to build trust and establish an environment in which the survivor feels comfortable sharing intimate details. That means, first and foremost, the therapist has to be receptive. They must try to understand how the survivors construct their world and their experiences without imposing their own personal views on their patients. Group therapy can help build that sort of environment because social context and solidarity make it easier for survivors to make sense out of what happened to them, to let down their guard just a little, crack open their shells, and let their crystals show. There's a third aspect to this issue: justice. Sexual assault survivors are consistently doubted, shamed, and dismissed. And this happens in the media. This happens in court. This happens wherever and whenever that kind of oppression is enabled. But I don't have to tell you that. You've seen the hashtag #MeToo trending on social media. You've watched Hollywood's premier stars dress in all black for the Golden Globes. And you've heard the allegations leveled against powerful people. What you don't know is that cases of sexual misconduct are routinely thrown out before they're ever tried behind closed doors. An NPR article for last November revealed that 94 to 97% of sexual harassment allegations never make it to court. Deborah Rode, the director of Stanford University's Center on the Legal Profession, explains that many judges lack an understanding of how sexual assault affects survivors on an emotional, psychological, and professional level. And as a result, they refuse to listen. They reject the cases and deny survivors the right to pursue justice. We need more judges who are willing to listen to survivors, to believe them, empathize with them, and give them a voice in court. Judges like Rosemary Aquilina, who presided over the sentencing hearing of former U.S. Olympic team doctor Larry Nassar, who was accused of molesting over 150 female athletes. Judge Aquilina allowed all 150 survivors to come forward and directly address their assaulter in court. And in doing so, she empowered them. She gave them a public platform to voice their experiences. She gave them permission to crack open their rock-hard shells just a little and show the world the crystals inside. But none of that matters if no one listens. Listening, being receptive, trying to understand, these are all conscious choices that we make. Too often, all we want to do is talk. I know, hard to believe given that I've just spent 10 minutes up here talking your ears off. But my experiences in Peru and my research following that taught me to be a better listener. So if you remember nothing else of what I've said here today, remember this: you are an agent of change. So choose to listen. Choose to empathize. Choose to look beyond someone's rock-hard exterior and choose to appreciate the crystals they have to offer. Thank you.